Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. All right, there we go. It's so wonderful to see you all. My name is Kevin Henry, and I am a faculty member at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I'm the one who looks really serious on the end. It's a very serious pose. I took the picture in the height of the pandemic, and so I had to be very serious about things. But nevertheless, I'm so joyed to be here with this illustrious panel. Yes, indeed. And we are here to talk a bit about the education wars. And so I'm going to allow the panelists to introduce themselves. Today we have Jennifer Berkshire, Donald Cohen, and Asma Elhouni. Did I do that? Asma Elhouni, excuse me. So I'm going to start in the interest of time because I do want to save a little time for us to have some Q&A with the audience. Nevertheless, the first thing I want to know a little about is if you can tell us about yourself and what got you into this work? Why are you interested in protecting public education?
So I'm Jennifer Berkshire, and really the most important thing you need to know about me right now is that I'm the proud owner of a public school. So I know the kids today call them belt bags. They are not, they are fanny packs. And some of you have been wondering, they look so cool, but I'm worried that if I get it, what if I can't fit my most important belongings in it? I've got great news. It's a perfect size. So I'm thrilled to be here today. I've gotten to spend a lot of time in Wisconsin, mostly following Heather around and learning from her. And I think she really convinced me that the fight to protect, defend, and strengthen public education is an urgent fight, but it's also one that has the potential to just bring in all kinds of different people. And so I've really taken that as my mission and inspired the book and the work that I'm doing. So that's why I'm so passionate about this stuff.
So my name is Donald Cohen. I am the executive director. I'll be a little bit more. I was going to put the damn shirt on, but I decided not to. It's one of my favorite shirts. It's so comfortable. I fly with it all the time. I live in Los Angeles. I run an organization now called In the Public Interest, and you may like that, right? I'm a mumbler. I run an organization called In the Public Interest, and we focus on all things against the privatization of public goods, and we are also what we call a pro-public organization. We deeply believe in public goods and the ability to and democratically control public goods, and I can talk about that more later. I wrote a book as well. There's some on the table. You can buy it, and all the money goes to y'all. Stays here in Wisconsin.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. My name is Asma Elhouni, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. I am National Lead Organizer for Race Forward's Heal Together campaign. And what we do is we support organizations and everyday people, even without organizations, organize school district campaigns across the country because there is a concerted effort to dismantle our public schools. And so why I'm here and why we're supporting people is to let them know this is really a part of a greater project to dismantle public education. And so in order to make sure our public schools are strong, we actually need to organize for them because as you write about, there is an intentional movement to privatize everything. And so we want to make sure our public schools, which is a public good and the bedrock of democracy, stays in place and we make it stronger and organize around that. Why I do this work? I think, so I'm old. I'm going to just say my age. You know, women don't usually do that. I'm 48 years old. I've been organizing for 20 years. But after 9/11, the Muslim community was under attack. And we were vilified, and basically we were surveillanced, we were deported, and it was legal to torture us, and we were really losing the battle of the narrative for who we are. And what was interesting is that I got training to go out and speak because we knew we had to tell our stories. And it was public school teachers who came out to us. And they said, you come and you tell your story. And I'll never forget that. And that was really proof to me that it is in our schools where we can really live out what it really truly means to be a multiracial democracy. So that's why I use it.
Thank you. So the first question is for Jennifer. We have your wonderful book, The Education Wars, and we in fact titled this panel around the education wars. And so I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about what are the education wars anyway?
Yeah, so I'm imagining that this will come as no news at all to those of you in the audience, but the education wars basically join an older fight, which is what you've been living through in Wisconsin, which is basically to defund and privatize public schools, and then to sort of pour accelerant on those fights through the culture wars, which you are also experiencing. And you know, we saw this happen really clearly in the wake of the pandemic, that you had suddenly school boards emerge as these sites of unbelievable sort of contestation. And I think that the real, you had people whose vision has long been one where we no longer have public schools, that instead we quote unquote fund students, not systems, which makes about as much sense as saying, we're going to fund individual commuters, not public transit. So I think that in many ways our current iteration of the education wars are the result of folks with influence and power and money feeling like they have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to try to drive a wedge between public school parents and their schools, between communities and their schools, and you're feeling that on the ground where you live. And so my co-author, Jack Schneider, and I, we really wanted to explain to people in as clear and accessible way as we possibly could that one, education wars are just a regular part of our landscape in this country. We are always fighting about schools. But also to sort of lay out very clearly why we're fighting about them now, and most importantly, what we can do about it. And so the book is actually, it's not just a feel-bad story, and that some of the feel-goodest parts actually come from Wisconsin, because in many ways you all have been ahead of the curve in both the ways that are unpleasant and unfortunate, but in also showing us what real resistance and organizing can look like.
Thank you. So Donald, in the public interest track spending privatization efforts on a range of issues. And so what does that actually mean for schools, and what trends or issues do you find the most concerning in this moment?
So I'm going to start by saying our definition of privatization. I have a very particular definition. It's private control over public goods. That's my definition. And then so the question, control is a really important word. I'll come back to that. Public goods are the thing, and I have a three-part definition of public goods because I think it's important that we understand that. And if there's any economists in the room, I think this is not the textbook definition. One is the things that we all need to survive, to thrive, to get through life. Health, mobility, broadband at this point, education, knowledge, clean air and water. Second, it's the things we need everyone to have. It's in our interest, regardless of whether you have a child in schools or not, for every kid to be educated. During COVID, we learned the health of all of us depended on the health of each of us. We need everyone to have these things. It's in our political interest, economic interest, social interest. And finally, if we agree that all means all, everyone should get, then we can only accomplish that if we do it together. Through government, through public institutions. So that's the definition of public goods. In education, we think of three pieces of three of the the drivers of privatization in education are in three pieces. First, it's what some unions call ESP, Education Support Professionals. Some other unions call them differently, but they're the bus drivers, the cafeteria workers, the paraprofessionals, the custodians. You know, there's well over 1 million of folks working that, in those jobs around the country, and they're all important to the education of kids. So the privatization of that is more like other contracting out. The jobs become crappier, lower wage, they get less benefits, they get less job security, lower unions. That's part number one. The second part is the lightly regulated growth of charter schools. And every state is different. Right? I live in California. And so what that means is, so in terms of when charter schools, the original idea of charters, laboratories of innovation and share. But now, charter schools, what charters represent is sort of a neoliberal victory that the market should really determine how we deliver schools. So we turn them into, market goods that we compete over in the market. And what happens when you do that? So there are, many of you may know this, there are charter schools that require their teachers to sign NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, so that they won't share the school's trade secrets. What are their trade secrets? Curriculum, lesson plans, the stuff that we should be sharing, and coincidentally, the stuff we pay for. And then the growth has been, in every state they're growing. Now, we may see something different as vouchers happen. And then the third piece is vouchers, as you all know about. And again, turning a private good, a public good, where we're all into a private good that we compete over, families are individual consumers in the marketplace. So I have a whole book on this, boo. It's not like, things don't happen magically, people want it. So I break it down to three forces. So first, there are ideological conservatives. There are true believers who think the market's a better way to do things. They really are. And and they're anti-government. They don't think government should be narrowed down to defense and a few other things. I won't tell you later who. I have a close family relative who believes that, and you all know who he is. I'll tell you later. Second, there's money interests, right? Both political money interests. The folks that did Act 10, they wanted to take unions out of the fight. Period, end of sentence, right? So they are fighting their political opponents to get permanent political control over school boards, states, United States federal government. And then third is the political class, who gets paid, who is intimately related to those others, right? But they see it in their interest to get elected. Every red state right now is moving towards universal vouchers right now. They got elected because that was their job to do. And that keeps them getting reelected because they've analyzed the forces that can make that happen. Where the money comes from their races, where the voters are. So it really is the who.
All right, thank you, Tom. Esma, I want to slightly switch gears to talk a little bit more about the work that you do with Public School Strong. And I'm wondering if you can, for our audience, really bring this to life and what this means and how this plays out in the work that you currently do, and what are some of the major concerns that your organization has and that you all are working on.
Can you repeat the very beginning of Public School Strong?
Yeah. So I'm just curious if you could talk a little bit more about Public School Strong and how does kind of privatization kind of work that's taking place, this movement towards privatization, which is national and global. How does your organization kind of respond to that?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. I also just want to say I just read your chapter in the book, and I want you to sign my book. All right, going back.
Hold on, you read your chapter on education?
That's exactly the chapter.
The thing to do is to read the other
I
chapters
will
that you
read the
know.
other chapter. I'm also well aware that there is a move to privatize everything. Yeah, but I did want to hear what you had to say about education. All right. Yeah, so basically with Race Forward, our campaign is Public School Strong. And going back to what is going on with vouchers, when we're talking about this move to privatize everything, one of the most aggressive efforts to privatize is vouchers. And so that's literally taking the funding that is supposed to go to public schools, that pool of funding for public schools, and they're really just redirecting it into private schools, which are predominantly religious Christian schools. So let's just like name it, all right? And that is really scary. It's really scary. Our proponents are basically saying that it's school choice, but it's not. It's kind of like giving someone a pizza and then giving someone a dirty crumb and say, there, you have a choice. We believe that school choice, or let's just say private schools, have not lived up to their promise. Like vouchers and private schools, they promised something, they have not lived up to it. And we want parents to know that what actually happens is there are less accountability when we're talking about private schools. There's less barriers and protections for our students, and those things are really important to a democracy, and private schools just don't have that. And so we are trying to organize people around the country to make our public schools stronger. I'm not standing here saying our public schools are perfect and yay, public schools. I'm here to say that the hope of America is in public education. And yes, it's not doing the best that it should, but it can, and the hope is in public education. And when we focus, thank you. And when we focus on private schools, we're literally removing resources and tried and true methods of really creating academic success for our children from actually taking place. So we really want to work towards stronger and the best public schools, because schools are the bedrock of our democracy.
Thank you. Actually, so I actually want to kind of springboard from that point for the entire panel. And I'm curious, I mean, as you kind of talked about how we could frame this question around why we need to be supporting public schools. And I'm currently in the, like literally I ran here, I told you all, from teaching a class this summer on leadership for equity. These are all current administrators or current teachers in the Dane County area. But nevertheless, they're fighting for their schools. In fact, one of my leaders is a teacher at La Follette. But nevertheless, one of the things that we often hear from critics of public education is that they'll say, well, there's a history in the United States of public schools not serving children, and therefore we need to have alternative forms of education that will actually, in fact, serve our children. Now, the data is not actually confirming that, but nevertheless, politics has less to do with data than it has to do with anything else. But I'm wondering, how do we put forth a kind of narrative or even a framing that says we need to fight for our public schools and why we should be doing that? So maybe you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'll say something first, and then if there's time, you can add something. We do this like a little thought exercise in the book, imagining a political candidate today, running on the idea that we're going to create a free K through 12 education system that we all tax ourselves to pay for, and everybody gets it. And you try to imagine what that candidate would be called today, a socialist or worse, right? The vision is so much more expansive than what we're even really capable of imagining. And I think basically what's happened since the Reagan era is that all we know how to do anymore is beat up on public schools. Like, we could just walk outside and start asking people, what's wrong with our public schools? And they would, we could all just rattle it off. And so we lose sight of what an ambitious democratic experiment this was, and how that, over the decades and over the span of history, we've kept making it more inclusive. And as a result, we do something that virtually no other industrialized country does, right? That we say that you are welcome, right? You don't have to speak English. You can have all kinds of special needs. You don't even have to be a citizen of this country. K-12 schools are for you. And so when Isabel talks about the fact that this is our democratic vision, I think we lost the vocabulary that allows us to make that stirring case, because we just just got so used to beating up on schools and talking about test scores, and think about how the rhetoric during the Obama years, how narrow it got, college and career readiness. And what we have to do, like, we need to recover that muscle memory that allows us to remind people what a big deal public education has been. And when I've been out in the cafeteria interviewing people from all around the state about the fights happening in their neighborhood, and I hear that language coming back, right? That as people realize, wow, my little local school in Kickapoo is very vulnerable right now. Here's what it would mean to our community to lose it.
I don't know if I make time, but so I'd say three things. One is, you have to remember most children are in public schools. Most. So that's number one. The second is, who here are teachers or have been teachers? Has there anything good happened in your classrooms? Seriously, any like cool stuff? Every day. Every day. In classrooms around America, in every district, there's cool shit happening in classrooms. So it's not all bad. And we need to be telling those stories over and over again. Because everyone's got the story about the bad public school. But a lot of them, because we were in focus groups, we were watching focus groups one year, a lot of it's like the game of telephone. They heard somebody said there was something happening bad in school. So that's the second thing. So that's important for us to do. School vouchers did not win in Texas. Why? Because rural Republicans like their schools. Right? So you have to remember this stuff. The third thing I think is really important, and it's one of the few places where people of difference come together. Different religions, different classes, different ethnicities, different beliefs. And I don't know if you've noticed, but the country's kind of in a weird place. And I think it's because at one of its cores, other than the neo-fascists, are that people don't talk to each other. And I think we need, if you think about it, in the parks, in the libraries, in the schools, those are the places we come together, and we need more of that, not less of that.
How many people have loved ones in their lives? Raise your hand. Yeah, loved ones. Oh. He's not loved. So all of you raised your hand. How many people get annoyed with their loved ones? Okay, so when parents come out and they say our school needs to be better, we need this or that, it's out of love. We do that with our friends, we do that with our parents, we do that with our siblings. As Heather has said in your book, Jennifer, the loudest parents could be our greatest allies. So we need all the stories. Our public schools aren't perfect. We need the great stories, but we also need the stories to say, this is how we can improve, this is where we fall short, and we do fall short. As a person of color, I can't sit here and say, cheer on our public schools, they're perfect. No, I can say they are the hope of this country. We want them to be better, and they can be better. And that's why I'm standing here today. What's the question? That's because I got Jennifer's book much more earlier on. I just got your book, and that's why I got this book, so everyone can hear it. I want to talk about how vouchers are really rooted in a history of racism and segregation accounts, so that we know, because we think this history is dead, it is not dead, it is alive and well today. So basically, 1959, Brown versus Ford desegregated schools. And what did Prince Edward County in Virginia do? Because they were against this, they shut down all their public schools. Once they shut down their public schools, they offered vouchers to white parents so that they can send their kids to private segregated schools. By 1970s, we had 200 of these private schools that are segregated, right? The Supreme Court ruled that that was unconstitutional. Fast forward today, and we have words like school choice is a civil rights thing. No, we're here to say that no. Private schools are continue the legacy of racism, continue the legacy of exclusion, and I want you to know, all they have to do, these mostly Christian private schools, is say, this is against our religion, and you are literally allowed to discriminate against children going to that school, right? And so they don't have those protections, and so we want to say that vouchers continue the legacy of racism, so when anyone says it's a civil rights issue, okay, it's a civil rights issue, but let me explain how it's a civil rights issue. We need to shut down these vouchers. Also, I just want to say, I think I compared private and charter schools to public schools using pizza and crumbs. I think that was an unfair analogy, so I do apologize. Research has shown that private and charter schools, students do as well or worse, but not better. Not better.
I mean, as opposed to, we love pizza, and we love cheese in Wisconsin. So I always tell people when I think about school choice, I think about it as if I'm walking down the street and someone tries to rob me and they say, give me your life or your wallet, and I have to make a choice. I don't want to give you either, but it's not a fair choice.
Can I say about choice? We've done polling and all this. Families don't want choice, they want good schools. For people that have friends in New York City, the choice system, it's all public, and it's like hundreds of kids. My kids went to school in San Diego, we have to look at 10 schools, but we don't want choice, we want a good school, and so there is no big mass demand for choice. It doesn't exist.
I actually kind of want to thread something that Esme mentioned, and thinking about this, we're in a very weird political moment, and really this actually, I sit down, this is a legitimate question. We have a moment where we're saying people that have cats and women and all types of weird stuff happening right now. There's a lot of weird stuff happening. And part of it is kind of fueled by this kind of religious right, Christofascism, so on and so forth. In your book, you talk about the role of religion. Like, what does this whole religion thing have to do with schools? And could you talk a little bit more for us about this connection between religion and vouchers and school choice and privatization?
Yeah, and I think in many ways it's the continuation of what Esme was just articulating so well, that when you think about what happened in the lead up to and the wake of Brown versus Board, that you had, parents and elites in the South saying basically, if the Constitution is going to tell us that we have to send our kids to integrated schools, then we're going to do everything we can to move them out from beyond the reach of the Constitution. That's exactly what we're seeing today with respect not just to race, but also to things like gender identity and the fierce battle over whether trans kids should have civil rights. That you have conservative policy elites saying, if the Constitution is going to insist that kids' civil rights be expanded, we're going to do everything we can to move them out from the reach of the Constitution. And so in many cases, that means moving them into private religious schools. And you'll notice that we're talking a lot right now about how weird the policy vision is. And I think that's actually a very accurate description as it relates to public education. Because in many ways, the policies that these guys have convinced themselves make sense are really weird. And you can tell that they've gotten out of the habit of talking to regular people. Because they're the ones who then end up running for office and talking about litter boxes in the schools. It's weird. But underneath this vision is this kind of longing for a return to traditional hierarchies. And I think that so explains this now really, an attempt in so many different states to move away from a publicly funded system of public schools into one of private religious schools where there's a hierarchy baked in, right? If only some of us get to go to heaven, there's your hierarchy. And so that chapter about what does religious freedom have to do with it it's got a lot to do with it, and I feel like we're going to be seeing a lot more of that too.
Amen to that. Your response, not to what she had. That was really bad. See, I may not be getting it, but I want to link. You mentioned the role of policy, and one of the things that we're seeing just increasingly all over the news are some policy suggestions that have been offered by the Heritage Foundation, particularly with Project 2025. And I'm wondering if, if it's everything from soup to nuts, we can get rid of everything, essentially hollow out the state. But I'm wondering if you all can talk a little bit about how you see, particularly some of the educational initiatives that Project 2025 is offering to us, and if you can talk about the concerns you see.
I didn't have the stomach to read the thing.
Yeah, so I'll just say a little bit about it. And in many ways, you all have been, Wisconsin was the testing ground for something like a Project 2025. So some of the stuff that's in there is just the stuff you've been hearing about forever, that they want to get rid of the Department of Education. Well, why is that? Well, some of it is, they don't like the idea that Department of Education is basically, not having publicly, if you can't access student loans through the government, it's going to cost a lot more to go to college, right? So something like that. But also that enforcement of student civil rights. That's what the Department of Education does. If you think we've gone too far in expanding civil rights, getting rid of the Department of Education is what you want to do. And then what I think is so interesting is that the hidden behind all the jargon that's in there, things like education savings accounts and all these different kinds of funding, they know this vision is really unpopular. Go around Wisconsin and tell people that your policy goal is to cut funding to public schools, to their public schools. And what you will find is that people will come together across party lines and they'll say, that's a terrible idea. We don't want that. And so it's a mix of conservative policy wish lists and things that are frankly very unpopular. And so I'm not at all surprised that they're now trying to distance themselves from this stuff.
Let me add one thing I meant to say earlier. So, if you don't have government and you put people in the market, then there are folks and interests who can make money. So there's $750 billion spent in public education in this country. That's a gold mine of possible profit and opportunity. And then in every sector that we write about in the book, there's $100 billion in prisons and there's this. The corporate class that I mentioned as the second force, they want you all out of the way politically, but they also want to get their hands on the money. And if you completely implement the, Project 2025, and there's a lot more money to make.
I guess I'll just add, I always said this in my session, but I'll just say it here again. I think it's really interesting that what we're seeing, this gap or this divide or tension between what we actually want on the ground, or what we want in our schools versus what actually is getting passed on state levels, on federal level as well. And so, and that's why it's really vital that we are organizing to ensure that we close this gap between what is being passed on our state level and what we actually want, because as you heard, what you actually want isn't what's actually getting passed, and the only way to really bring this home for people is to organize locally. So I am going to put in a pitch around Public School Strong again, just to let people know. Public School Strong is an initiative to try to get every school district organized around public schools. And the thing that's pretty unique about it is we are partnering with WePen here in Wisconsin, is that you all are doing wonderful things, amazing things. And what Public School Strong can do is we have a platform called Control Shift, where all the wonderful stuff that you're doing, you can actually see on this platform. So you can communicate with each other. You can say, hey, we have a school board meeting here, or next door, this district, if you can come to our school board meeting because we have something similar that happened to you all, maybe you could speak to it here. But it connects all the wonderful work you're doing here. So definitely plug into Public School Strong. So again, just lifting up the fact that what we want on the ground is very different than what we're seeing actually get passed. And that's really important that we change that.
That's a great transition for us. We are running out of time. Not yet. We're going to ask for money soon, but not yet. We've talked a good bit about the gloom and doom, the privatization and market-based forces. And could you give us maybe some examples? You just mentioned your organization. Could you give us some examples, anyone on the panel, about what you see as some good movement work that's taking place, some good counter-hegemonic, some fancy words, just some good movement work that's happening that's pushing up against this kind of rights movement towards privatization?
So people are always surprised when I tell them that the candidates who ally themselves with Moms for Liberty or the 17th strategy doesn't work, right? That is not, you have a hard enough job without also being asked to defend vulnerable institutions. So we started to see these coalitions form, and I think what was really exciting is because you had groups that hadn't traditionally been involved in this work, they didn't speak the language of education insiders like us, right? They didn't immediately find themselves venturing into the weeds. They were able to make the case for both for public schools, but also for defending vulnerable kids in a way that ordinary people started to understand. And so in places like Wisconsin, but also North Carolina, and really we see this happening all over the place. The reason that extremist candidates are losing is because communities are coming together to say, you know what, this isn't what we want at all. And as a result, you really see folks being energized around exactly that disconnect that Esma was just talking about. That people's vision for what they want for their own kids, and for their schools, and for their communities looks nothing like what extremist candidates are offering, but also what rigged legislatures are enacting.
Let me, I mentioned Texas before. Governor Abbott tried 4 times and he failed. Now he's still at it in primaries and the Republicans and all that. But we work with groups all around the country. So Idaho, they didn't win their, they lost, the bad guys lost their voucher bill. And we work with, first we work most closely with our business organization for public education. Tennessee, governor failed there. There will be a ballot measure in Nebraska. Some of you may know about that already. There also will be, it's a complicated case, I'm not going to describe it, but our allies, the union and community allies, put it on the ballot, collected signatures now twice to put it on the ballot. People really want to defeat, the voucher. Kentucky is going to be on the ballot. The Republicans, put it on the ballot. There is a massive and pretty effective coalition fighting it. There are amazing people doing similar work in similar networks in Arizona, in some of the hardest states, Arizona, Florida. So, because we're a national organization, we see it all around the country, and it's some of the most exciting work I've seen in a long time, including what you all are doing here.
All right, so we've got a few minutes left. First, can we just thank our panelists for their... just kidding. Just kidding. Thank you for the thanks, but not yet.
Just really quickly, Martin Luther King said, you don't win by being right. So it's really vital that we organize. And I want to say, when we organize, we win. And we've seen that time and time again. Even if you don't win the first time, you try again. And while we lost, I wouldn't even call it losing because we have to redefine what it means to win. If you didn't win your ultimate goal, you know what you did win? A bigger base. More knowledgeable people so you can win in the future. So it's really vital. I'll just look up the example of Tennessee. Tennessee has a Republican governor, a Republican-led legislature, and they beat their vouchers. They use Public School Strong, where they're going to every county and speaking up to pass anti-voucher legislation. And in doing so, they educated the public. They let their representatives know that when you go to your legislature, we see you, and the next time you pass a horrible bill, we're not going to vote you in. So it was an opportunity to educate people, and they killed their vouchers. So we can all do it. So when we organize, we win.
We're trying to get it to clap. So thank you very much for this. We're going to open it up. We have a little time for some questions from the audience. So, yes, come on up. I'll bring the mic down. I would prefer not to, just in case we have folks. Yeah.
Thank you. I was just wondering, how do you speak to parents that say that they do want their kids to learn in a Christian school or something like that? Like they don't want their kids to be learning amongst the general public schools. Like more specifically, how do you speak to parents about this stuff?
I have something to share. I'm embarrassed that I'm going to share it because I want to be honest with you all. I have 8 boys and they went to private school. Because I was so burned by public school myself, I didn't want my kids to go to public schools. I have now changed, but I want to say people have a right to do what they want. But we can't use public funds to fund it. Right? And so we have separation of church and state in this country. I'm a religious person. I love my faith. I'm a practicing Muslim, and at the same time, I know it's really important to support our public schools. And if people want to go to private, you can do that, but we're not going to be paying for it.
Hi, I'm a little bit of an outsider. I'm an organizer. I'm not an educator. I'm just learning about a lot of this stuff for the first time today. And like on a surface level, the voucher program looks amazing because you have all these rich people. They send their kids to private schools. It sounds like, yeah, we're building equity. We're allowing access for some of that for lower income people. But then when you dig into it, you find out that it's not providing better education. It's making our existing education worse. And to combat that perception, you really need people to be educated, which is the very thing this is fighting against. So I guess what I'm asking is, what do you think like the best point to break this vicious cycle is, and ideas?
I'll take a first cut. So 2 things that I think in that particular case. The fact that most of the take-up around the country are for wealthier people already in private school is not a popular notion. The second is, anybody who believes, we all think that public schools should be as good as possible, there should be reform, we should always be looking to improve it. There is no reform, improvement of public schools that includes taking away their money. And when a kid goes to either a charter or a voucher, they don't just take the money with them, the ADA, their daily attendance money. They actually leave a net cost to the district. Because one kid goes to a charter school, the money goes, but all the cost doesn't go. One kid goes, you don't fire a 30th of a teacher and eliminate a 30th of a classroom. So there's a net loss when students go to vouchers and charters. And that's why Texans are saying no. Because we know we're going to lose money. We're going to have to close down our sports program. We're going to have to close down the other things because our schools are not going to be funded. He's got the mic back there.
I have a question. When 800,000, almost 800,000 kids here in Wisconsin are educated last year in the public schools, and only 53 or so thousand in voucher schools. Why isn't education leading in every politician who's running for office right now? Why isn't that the first issue? Because we're on the right side. Public education is serving way more people, and why don't they lead with that? Why don't they talk about it? It's very confusing to me.
So I used to do politics. I used to be the political director of the Labor Council, so I like the political questions. So I would speculate, because I think data is important in politics. One is that most voters don't have kids in schools. So let's remember that. Second is the quote narrative that all schools are terrible has an enormous impact. Well, it's really bad, so something's got to be done. And I think that's the problem. When I said earlier, we got to be telling the good stories too. We have to counter that narrative. And then there's a massive force behind the other side, right? I mean, you have practically a supermajority here, right? Republican supermajority, and their mission is to dismantle public education. So you've got to sort of those 3 things pushing together. And, they're winning. But when you can, to Edwin's point, when you can take it to folks, this is what's going to happen to your school, we always do.
So our last question.
I'd just like the panel to address the role of special education in all of this too, because it's my understanding that private schools, if they do not want to provide, they do not have the resources to provide for special education, they don't have to. And then it's a double whammy.
So that's such a great example of where, like, we could quickly get into the weeds on special ed funding, because a lot of you are in districts where you're really paying the price for the fact that the state underfunds special education. But if we back up and we look at the vision that's now on offer, it's one that basically says, you know what, we opened up our schools to kids with special needs 4 decades ago. Well, we're going to walk that back, right? If you're going to be on your own now, as far as if you're a parent with a kid with special needs, and we're going to fund schools that aren't required to take your kid. And so imagine what that future looks like. Well, it looks an awful lot like the past. And I think it's really important that we have folks, I see that as an organizing opportunity. There we have a chance to ally parents who have to fight like crazy to get their kids what they need. And they know that vouchers are a loser for them, right? Like, they have no choice but to stay in the public schools, so they need the public schools to work with them. What if we were able to get those folks in concert with some of the rest of us, the way Heather is always involved?
I would say one thing. Sorry, Heather. One thing. I swear. I came away from public. I want to make 2 idea points. Markets exclude. Right? That's the first point. The second is the larger worldview ideas that want to turn all of us into consumers of services where we pay for what we need and we don't, and only those things, rather than citizens, small c, with obligations and responsibilities to each other. That's the project of Target 2024.
So again, thank you so much to our wonderful panel.